Hello ladies and gentlemen, Nick here, and welcome to this 4-film ranking of the Lethal Weapon films. So today we will be ranking the 4 Lethal Weapon films from 1987 to 1998. 11 years of buddy cop action adventures. Such fun! For more thoughts on what I thought of the films, please check out the individual reviews of the 4 films. So let's dive right into the ranking with, remind you of the films. We have Lethal Weapon from 1987, the film. Lethal Weapon 2 from 1989. Lethal Weapon 3 from 1992. And 1998's Lethal Weapon 4, the year before my birthday, by the way. So, and this Blu-ray came out in 2010. Yeah, just then you know that. So anyway, so let's get down to the ranking with number 4. Number 4 is, well, you probably saw this coming a mile away, Lethal Weapon 3. This one, there was a tonal shift, and I think with that, and also a stylistic approach to the storytelling, but it didn't quite feel as right. I'm not sure, maybe the fact that it was different just meant it wasn't quite the same, and things just didn't feel, no. Change is good, but just felt a bit odd in some places. It still had a good story, but it was probably the weakest one. The villain, however, is probably my favourite, although he is in competition with Jet Li's one from the next film. And also Gary Busey's henchman. Well, in terms of henchmen, I think the first 2 films did better, but with villains, I'm more leaning towards the latter 2. You can debate whether Jet Li's one is a main villain or not, but definitely, he's definitely a great one anyway. But Jack Travis is pretty much my favourite villain. And he's very funny, especially the "Hi Billy, bang, bye Billy, see you Billy" scene where he kills Billy at the police station. That was great. And Lorna kicks bottom in this film, which is something this film does better than the 4th film, Lorna's character. I wish she would have done a bit more action in the 4th film. If there was a 5th one, she might have done a bit more. But what she did was okay, but I prefer her in this one a little bit. Once you get past her stubborn side earlier on, and she becomes... she's working with Riggs and Murtaugh in uncovering Travis and being a kick-ass character, then that's when she becomes a great character. She becomes a really great character. And yeah, I really liked her. I would like Lorna to appear in the TV show, by the way. That's an idea. If Damien Wayans does decide to quit the Lethal Weapon TV show at the end of Series 3 or in Series 4, introduce Lorna. Introduce a female lead character to the show. It at least ties in with the films. So anyway, but the Chief gets a bit more to do, so that's good. So those are positives to it. So yeah, that's Lethal Weapon 3. On to my number 3 choice. Now this one is a tough one. 3 and 2. I think it is a competition between the 1st and the 4th films. I'm going to go... Some people aren't going to be happy about this. I'm going to go with the first one. So number 3 is the original Lethal Weapon. Killing you, that's the lasting love who's ever meant to do. Become a lethal weapon. Now the reason for this is because because the dynamic is just starting in this one, so I think the character building is just starting here, but when you get to film 4, that's when they pretty much perfected it. I think. I mean, you see, well, it's probably still at its best in the second film, but I think they perfected the development by the fourth film so much that they could introduce more characters like Leo, Lorna, and Butters, and have them join in the main plots, or in some cases the subplots, to kick bottom or just be really cool or funny, and also help build the dynamic more. So it's fun to see that. With the first film, it's just the main two characters throughout the film, but they still do it a really great way, and they still have it's still a brilliant film. Definitely one out of all of them. I think the first film is the one that needs to be viewed by anyone checking out, and then they can decide whether they want to carry on with the others. And then, yeah, you've got some great characters developing throughout the film, which is why we would like to see them in more films. So that's why we got the series afterwards, because they were such a great dynamic in the first film. It's just that said dynamic needed to start somewhere, and the start, whilst great, it's even better when we've seen that dynamic later on in the series. I do have to say Mr. Joshua is a brilliant henchman. He's sadly not the main villain, though. The main villain is probably the weakest in the series, sadly. But he's still Mr. Joshua's still a great presence, and he even gets to have a final showdown with Riggs towards the end, and Gary Busey does a great job. So that's the first film. Number 2, as I've already mentioned, is the fourth film, Lethal Weapon 4. Previously, this had been my favourite, but after the rewatches for these reviews, this was my favourite back after I first saw it, but after the rewatches, it went down a bit, partly due to it's still got the same tone and style as the third film. It's just that the plot and the characters are improved, apart from Lorna, who has had a bit of a downgrade. That's something I always preferred with the third film. Lorna had a bit of a downgrade for the fourth film in terms of character, and kind of almost in a way had to make room for Sergeant Butters, played by Chris Rock. So hopefully, if there was going to be a fifth film, or if there is a fifth film and everyone does come back, there will be a 5-member team dynamic, because in this film, it's still pretty much 3, sometimes 4, if Leo's there as well. So if there is a fifth film, a 5, maybe 6 main character dynamic would be great in at least one scene. And Jet Li, I think, could be the best of... Well, I said Travis was my favourite villain, but Jet Li could be the best villain, or at least, slash henchman. If Jet Li's character is a henchman, then he is probably slightly better than Gary Busey's one. But if he's a villain, Busey's character, Mr. Joshua, is the best henchman. And if Lee is a henchman though, then the best villain would be Travis. Either way, the second film's ones aren't quite as good as the other 3's. Apart from the main villain of the first film, who is the weakest. But in terms of henchmen, it's Mr. Joshua or Jet Li's character. If Jet Li's considered the villain, then it is Mr. Joshua. And in terms of villains, if Lee is the henchman, then Travis is the best. He definitely is my favourite. But if Lee is the villain, he is the best villain. I kind of got myself muddled up there. But yeah, some great stuff, great performances, great dynamics, and yeah, it's having that great dynamic from the main 2 leads, as well as with other characters, both allies and villains, that really pushes this film up slightly higher than the first film. Otherwise, I think it might have been the other way around, if we focused on plot alone. But it does bring us to our number one, and this had been my second favourite film back after the main first viewings. But after rewatching it, I was like, holy shit, this was amazing. It could potentially be the best one, but I rewatched the other two afterwards, beforehand, and then after seeing Lethal Weapon 4, I was like, yeah, sorry, you've gone down a bit. This film however, has gone up a bit, even whilst the scores for the other three films haven't really changed, with 8 out of 10 for the third one and 9 out of 10 for the other three back in May, whilst 1, 3 and 4 scores haven't changed after the recent reviewings, this film's ranking has gone up to a 10, and I think you'll know which film it is if you've seen the reviews, and you've probably guessed it by this point because I've not mentioned it yet. It is Lethal Weapon 2.
I can see by your grin that you're trembling within. It's all over town, cheer down.
Yep, Lethal Weapon 2 is my favourite Lethal Weapon film, and it's not just mine, it's Mel Gibson's, Danny Glover and Richard Donner's as well. The main two actors and the film series director. So, yeah, so Lethal Weapon 2 has the best action, the best plot, the best character dynamic between the main two leads and Leo when you've got him there. Whilst, like I said, it's great to see the dynamic with the other characters, the dynamic itself is at its best in this film. As are the characters, I think. The characters pretty much are at their best in this film. Leo may get slightly better later on, but as he is now, he is brilliant. The villains, whilst I don't consider them the worst villains, I would say the henchman is probably the weakest of the henchmen. Well, at least of the main henchmen anyway. But he is still a pretty great henchman, and the villain is also pretty great. He is a pretty menacing presence. It's better than the one from the first film. I also love how the henchman has that tie into Riggs's backstory, how he basically confesses that he was the one who killed Riggs's wife. And that leads, and then Riggs also discovers that they've killed his new girlfriend. And they try to kill him as well, and he kind of snaps and tries to go on a revenge mission, aided by Murtaugh, firstly in rescuing Leo and destroying the house, and then eventually killing every single last South African Nazi at the harbour, and eventually destroying their goals. So, yeah, and said South African Nazis are basically South African Nazis, so yes, they get the most satisfying villain deaths in the series, especially the henchman. He gets the container dropped on him. That is such a satisfying death, especially for the fucker who killed Riggs's wife. You go die, you bastard. And as for the main villain, whilst he does get shot, Murtaugh has a great quip when saying it. And said the main villain had just shot Riggs just beforehand, so Riggs almost died. In fact, in the original story and in one version of the film, he did die, and test audiences were like, no, we want him alive, we prefer that version. The original story did feature Riggs' death. With the rewrite, they had the option of killing him off or keeping him alive, and the test audiences, thankfully, kept him alive. So thank God those test audiences. And the new script writes, I would have liked to see some more of Shane Black's idea, like the more gruesome torture scene. Apparently it was a torture scene like the first film, but even nastier. But at least Riggs didn't die at the end. I'm so glad about that, because then we got 2 more films. If Riggs had died, I don't think Lethal Weapon would be remembered as well for a franchise, for a series. At least it's just 2 notable films. I think that's the same with Terminator. If there wasn't any more after the second film, the difference is Terminator 2 is such a well-known film that even if it had ended with just 2, it probably would have still been, both films are pretty memorable. So if they had ended with just 2 films, then it probably wouldn't have been as much of an effect. But Lethal Weapon, I don't think, would have been as well-known. The first 2 films wouldn't have been as well known without the other 2 following. So, I think it's a good thing that they had more films after. They had another 2 films afterwards. Die Hard is a film that probably will be remembered without having the need for sequels. So that one, if that one hadn't got any sequels, that would have been okay. But Lethal Weapon, I think, or if Die Hard had ended after 2 films, again, they're pretty much well known in themselves to not worry too much whether they did or not, depending on fan or audience preparation. But like I said, with Lethal Weapon, I think that it wouldn't be remembered as much if it wasn't for the 3rd or 4th films alongside the first 2. So that is why I'm happy for Riggs's survival, plus the dynamic could continue in said sequels and get even, well, I don't know if it get even better, but you get even more of it, and it's still really fun. It just is just a shame that they went off a bit of a tonal direction after this, but it still feels brilliant. And yeah, in my mind, it is the best Lethal Weapon film made so far. Whether it'll ever be topped by a potential 5th film or any episode in the show is to be seen. So that's it from my rankings. Just to remind you of where the positions of the films. Number 4 is Lethal Weapon 3. Number 3 is Lethal Weapon 1. Number 2 is Lethal Weapon 4. And number 1 is Lethal Weapon 2. And as for the TV show, I might review Series 3 when it airs in the UK. I might do reviews of the series on the main channel. As for the first 2 seasons, I have seen some episodes from the last Series 2. Might be able to catch some repeats on record. However, as for reviews of Series 1 and 2, if I'm able to get the DVDs or Blu-rays and then watch the stories, then maybe I can provide reviews for the Retro channel for Lethal Weapon, the show's first 2 seasons. For definitely Series 3, I am planning, or at least thinking about, doing reviews for the episodes from the 3rd series on the main channel. So be on the lookout for that if I do go yes, which is very likely for those. As for Series 1 and 2, that might be a bit more in the future, maybe a year or 2's time, I'm not sure. I'm hoping to get the Blu-rays, but they're pretty pricey at the moment, so I might have to wait. It's always the Christmas list. So, thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye, and I hope you enjoyed this. So I hope you enjoyed this ranking, so thank you for watching, and I'll see you... So I hope you all enjoyed this ranking, and thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye. Don't forget to click below to subscribe to the official Nicholas Payne Retro YouTube channel. Here I came. So, if he's not a henchman, then I would say Gary Busey's character was the best henchman in the first film. But if he's a villain, I would say he's the best villain. Sorry, hang on. Either way, the second film's villains and henchmen are not considered the best, but that's just a slight disappointment. So, the original film would have had him end with that, but they rewrote it to have a open-ended death, a death whether they could go with. However, a rewrite then had it saying that they could have killed him off, but at the same time they couldn't have. But then so I hope you enjoyed this ranking. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye. I don't know why I did that. Oh well, bye.